Tonight on Reporting Scotland. The row over plans to evict failed asylum seekers in Glasgow. The UK's immigration minister refuses to say whether she supports the move. The Scottish Conservative leader Ruth Davidson backs calls for Boris Johnson to apologise over his controversial comments on the burqa. How knowing the location of a defibrillator when this boy collapsed at an ice rink may have saved his life.
I think maybe this was a piece of equipment that staff wasn't fully aware of. It wasn't in the first aid room where Jaden was. It was located somewhere else in the building.
A base is being set up to make it easier for them to be found. Also in the programme. We're in Amiens, where events have been held on the 100th anniversary of the battle which helped bring the First World War to an end.
And join me live from Celtic Park ahead of another night of Champions League qualifying. Tonight, the champions of Greece are the visitors.
Good evening. The UK's immigration minister has refused to say whether she supports plans to evict asylum seekers in Glasgow by changing the locks on their doors. Caroline Noakes was in Edinburgh this afternoon for a meeting with the Scottish Government. Landlord Serco has put its plans on hold after legal action was launched this week. Katie Hunter reports.
We're here just outside Carnoustie to see...
The immigration minister on the right has been on a two-day trip to Scotland. Yesterday she visited a fruit farm with a fellow Conservative MP. But the Home Office told us Caroline Noakes wouldn't be available to do media interviews about the planned eviction of asylum seekers in Glasgow.
Hi, I'm Katie from the BBC. Just wondering if you agree with Serco's decision to evict asylum seekers by changing locks on the door.
I think it's really important that I continue my round of meetings. I'm at Glasgow City Council yesterday, spoke to Serco on the phone yesterday, and I'm now going in to see members of the Scottish Government.
Do you think they're doing the right thing?
So I think it's really important that we conduct the meetings, that the task force that met this morning continues its work, and that we make decisions going forward.
But do you agree with what they're doing? Because it's caused quite a lot of controversy.
You'll be aware, of course, that Serco has paused their decision, and what we're looking at is the best way forward.
Campaigners are angry about plans by landlord Serco to evict some asylum seekers by changing their locks. The company says it's been providing free accommodation for more than 300 asylum seekers who have no right to be in the UK. But some people threatened with eviction deny they've reached the end of their appeal process.
Can you 100% guarantee that the names of the people you have given to Serco have reached the end of the road in terms of their asylum application? Because there seems to be a lot of doubt about that.
What's really important is that we continue the engagement with the City Council, with Scottish ministers and Serco to make sure that we get the right solution going forward.
So you can't give those guarantees?
I think it's really important that you allow me to continue the engagement that we've started with ministers and with colleagues from Glasgow City Council.
Caroline Noakes met Communities Secretary Aileen Campbell for just under an hour this afternoon.
Today I think it's regrettable that the Home Office still don't want to step up and support the people that have been made potentially destitute and homeless through this incredibly callous policy of locking outdoors. And so while we're really pleased that there has been this temporary pause in place around changing the locks on people's accommodation, clearly the processes and policies surrounding asylum are failing, and we really need the Home Office to step up and find a long-term solution that is compassionate and treats people with dignity and respect. That's something that we still need to work through with the Home Office. That wasn't there today.
No agreement today, but both sides say they want to continue talks. Katie Hunter, Reporting Scotland, Edinburgh.
The Scottish Conservative leader has described comments by Boris Johnson about burqas as gratuitously offensive. Ruth Davidson has backed calls for him to apologise. The former Foreign Secretary said women wearing burqas looked like letterboxes and bank robbers. The Muslim Council for Scotland has also condemned his language. Laura Maxwell reports.
What Muslim women choose to wear in public often provokes debate, and it's one which the former Foreign Secretary has jumped right into. Although Boris Johnson is against a ban on wearing face veils in public, the language he's used has created a storm. Writing in the Daily Telegraph, Mr Johnson said schools should be able to ask a student to remove her veil if she turned up looking like a bank robber. He went on, it's absolutely ridiculous that people should choose to go around looking like letterboxes.
These are crass comments that have come from a very senior member of the Conservative Party, and all they've gone to do is highlight how much of a problem there actually is within the party with Islamophobia. And it's unfortunate that given the mounting evidence of Islamophobia in the party, there isn't any acknowledgement of it or indeed any moves towards addressing it.
The burqa has become highly politicised in recent years. Assumptions are often made that women are forced to wear them by men. But for those who choose to wear it, it's an important symbol of respect and piety, and a symbol of their religious devotion. For some, Mr Johnson's comments once again place Muslim women under an unwanted spotlight.
Boris Johnson is somebody who's kind of widely thought of as a bumbling buffoon and things like that, but in my opinion he's a very intelligent man who knows exactly what he's doing, and what he's done is he's picked on a vulnerable group of people just to basically get some airtime, and I think that's extremely dangerous for someone in his position to be doing.
Boris Johnson's comments haven't just offended Muslim women. Members of his own party are also calling for an apology.
This was just a needless, lazy, offensive remark, and it completely undermined the much more serious issue surrounding the burqa, the questions of whether or not there should be a burqa ban, for example. And I really do think that he should be grown up enough to understand that he's crossed the line and he should apologise.
The Muslim Council for Scotland now wants a review of what it calls mounting evidence of Islamophobia within the Scottish Conservative Party. Laura Maxwell, reporting Scotland, Glasgow.
Police say they are following a positive line of inquiry after a teenager was stabbed and 2 others injured during a large disturbance in East Renfrewshire last night. Police were called to Overlea Park at around 8 o'clock. Around 100 school pupils were understood to have gathered to celebrate their exam results. 3 injured teenagers were taken to the Queen Elizabeth University Hospital in Glasgow. One of them was apparently stabbed in the chest with a screwdriver. Well, one day on from the exam results, pupils who didn't get the grades they needed for their chosen university place are considering their options. But 2 of Scotland's top universities are only giving the places that are still available to applicants from disadvantaged areas. Well, our education correspondent Jamie McIver is at Edinburgh University for us. So tell us more about this, Jamie.
Well, Jackie, to set the scene for you, the Scottish Government expects universities to take in more students from disadvantaged areas. Eventually, it wants 1/5 of new students to come from these areas. Now, generally speaking, it's the older universities which still have the most to do to meet these long-term targets. Now, every year after the exam results, a relatively small number of places are still unfilled, and they go into what's called the clearing system to try to fill them. Here at Edinburgh, for the past 2 years, the clearing places have only been available to those who come from disadvantaged areas, and Glasgow is in the same situation this year. Now, this issue touches on a lot of things which are well worth debating. Some worry that the efforts to help more disadvantaged people get to university could inadvertently make it harder for everyone else unless the total number of places continues to grow, while others would say that using the postcode as the definition of disadvantage simply isn't the best way to do it.
And often, Jamie, people get angry that spare places at universities are only available to applicants from out with Scotland. Why is this happening?
Well, indeed, Jackie, essentially it's a practical consequence of free tuition in Scotland, which the Scottish Government is, of course, very proud of. Nearly all the free places which are available to Scots are taken up once the exam results are out. Last year there were something like 1,700 places available in clearing to Scots. Free tuition means there's a fixed number of places overall available to Scots, though I should stress the number of Scots who get to university is hovering around about a historic high. However, universities can decide for themselves just how many fee-paying applicants from other parts of the UK to admit, but the universities are adamant they would never not give a Scot a place in order to let in a fee-paying applicant from elsewhere. That's essentially comparing apples with pears, and to suggest otherwise is to distort the situation.
Jamie, thank you very much. Union leaders say large numbers of their members are likely to vote for strike action in Glasgow as a new row erupts over equal pay claims. Unison says the City Council has broken promises as thousands of women claim for being underpaid compared to men. But the council says it's determined to reach a settlement by Christmas. Here's our political correspondent, Andrew Kerr.
What do we want? Equal pay! When do we want it? Now!
Protesting for equal pay, women who work for Glasgow City Council took to the streets earlier this year. They were hopeful there would be a settlement. The council wanted to negotiate, not litigate. They claim they've been underpaid for years compared to their male counterparts. But now Unison say the council's breaking their promises, and the women are angry.
Absolutely devastated that not again. You know, I mean, we seem to go over 2 steps forward, 1 step back. You know, I mean, this has been continuing. People have lost their lives waiting for this equal pay. They've robbed us for years, basically.
This affects some of the lowest paid women in the city. Unison are worried there won't be a chance for a proper negotiation.
I think that it's very likely that large sections of our membership will vote for strike action. I think we've got to understand what the equal pay settlement means to our members. It's a loss of pay since 2006.
The council leader says they remain 100% committed to delivering justice for equal pay claimants who have been waiting for over a decade for this long-running issue to end. She adds the council will seek to have a settlement figure agreed with claimants' representatives by the end of 2018.
It's thought the final bill for the settlement could be around £500 million. That's taxpayers' money, of course. But the women who are claiming the cash say it's now time to get this sorted with no further delays. Andrew Kerr, reporting Scotland at the City Chambers in Glasgow.
It's claimed 2 janitors at an Aberdeen school may have been exposed to asbestos along with a worker. BBC Scotland revealed last month that the material had been disturbed at Bridge of Dawn Academy during maintenance. Aberdeen City Council has begun an investigation but says it can't comment on how many people have been potentially exposed.
We, of course, have now contacted our representatives and we are got a register ourselves from Unite, and we will place people on that register. Let's remember that the one worker that originally damaged the asbestos was allowed to go home contaminated, and that they were the whole weekend with their family and friends. This council needs to be answerable for its actions.
Do you know where your nearest defibrillator is? And do you think the emergency services know about it? Well, we're all being asked to record the location of the life-saving machines so that in an emergency, 999 call handlers can direct us to use them before an ambulance arrives. Maura Kinneborough reports.
Jayden was a successful skater, but he died aged 10 after collapsing on the ice in cardiac arrest. A defibrillator could have saved him.
There was one at the ice rink. There was just too much commotion and nobody actually went and got it. So I think maybe this was a piece of equipment that staff wasn't fully aware of. It wasn't in the first aid room where Jayden was. It was located somewhere else in the building.
Thousands have fundraised to buy these machines for locations all over the country, but there's no central database to pinpoint where they are. Mapping them will mean if you call 999, you can be directed to the nearest device.
You cannot afford to wait until the ambulance comes. For every minute that nothing is done, there's a 10% decrease in survival. So if nothing is done, whether it be defib or whether it be CPR, the person will almost certainly die. The other thing is that nothing you do can make it worse.
Defibrillators tell the user what to do.
Follow the voice prompt calmly.
But what if I get it wrong?
Effectively, you can't get it wrong. As you can see on the pads, they show you exactly where they go. It's idiot-proof, and you could just have saved a life.
Scotland has a poor survival rate for non-hospital cardiac arrest. Only 1 in 12 people survive. It's hoped recording defibrillator locations will help reduce the high number of deaths. Maura Kinneborough, reporting Scotland, Edinburgh.
It's 18 minutes to 7. A reminder now of tonight's top story. The UK's immigration minister refuses to say whether she supports plans to evict failed asylum seekers in Glasgow. And still to come, over the oceans to Skye, the story of the New Zealand farmer who drove his family back to his ancestral heartland. The centenary of one of the last key events of World War I is being commemorated in France. The Battle of Amiens on the 8th of August 1918 signalled the start of the final phase of the conflict. Well, let's go now to Willie Johnson, who's there for us this evening. Willie.
Jackie, this was 4 years into a conflict that, when it started, people had thought and hoped would be over by its first Christmas, and yet still battles were raging all along the Western Front. There seemed to be no end in sight, until on this day in 1918, the Battle of Amiens started to change that. For the first time, the Allied armies came together in a much more cohesive way than they ever had before. Their infantry might was properly supported by artillery, by tanks, by air support, and the Germans were really taken completely by surprise. It proved to be a major turning point.
This tranquil pasture land north of Amiens was the scene of one of the most definitive moves of the war. In a single day, the Allied forces advanced 8 miles at the start of what became known as the 100-day offensive, leading directly to the armistice 3 months later.
A real pivot point in the war for the Allies. They've had a hammering, really, from the Germans in the early parts of the year with the German spring offensives. But Amiens is so crucial, really, because it's the kind of complex convergence of Allied strength coming good, if you like.
Scots served and perished at Amiens. 100 years ago this morning, Flight Lieutenant George Ramsay from Glasgow was shot down and killed. An air pioneer who played football for Queen's Park before joining up.
Why George, like 11 of his fellow men, went and enlisted? Why then he took a secondment into the Air Force, one of the first men to do so? Why he was trained then as a pilot? And why he was chosen for the low bombing operation on 8th August 1918 will always remain a mystery.
Ivan Ruddick came to remember his uncle William Spears, who served with the Highland Light Infantry.
He was never an ancient figure as far as I was concerned. And just the way generations go, he was one of my mother's elder brothers. But nevertheless, the difference in age was only 10 years, in fact. And my mother lived on to 2004. So if William hadn't been killed, he would have lasted well, possibly into the 1990s.
5 students from Clydebank and Broughty Ferry were guests today in recognition of research into victims of this battle and others.
We've been making big books and visiting them in cemeteries out here and back home as well, because we've got a couple in our local cemetery just a 5-minute walk away, so it's quite special to be here.
When you come out here to places like this and you see all the gravestones lined up, it really puts into perspective just how many people really fought and died out here. We got here on Monday.
After the commemoration, the youngsters met the First Minister, here representing the Scottish Government.
This was a really significant battle. It was at the beginning of the end of the First World War, and of course many Scots people lost their lives in the Great War, and I think as First Minister it's important for me to be part of the commemoration.
There were moving accounts in the letters, diaries and poems of people who fought here, and at the end, floral tributes for their sacrifice.
If the Battle of Amiens was the beginning of the end of the war, the event here today at Amiens Cathedral was also the beginning of the end of these big set-piece commemorations for the centenary, the next and final ones for the armistice in November.
Thank you very much, Willie Johnson there. To sport now, and Celtic continue their quest for a place in the Champions League group stages tonight. They're at home to AEK Athens in the first leg, third round qualifier. Our senior football reporter Chris McLaughlin is at Celtic Park. Over to you, Chris.
Yes, it's game number 5 of a potential 8 for Celtic in their bid to get to where they want to be. That, of course, is the Champions League group stage. The champions of Greece are here trying to put a spanner in the works. My sidekick this evening to discuss the match is the former Celtic striker Scott McDonald. Scott, is this one Celtic should realistically be looking at doing well in tonight?
Well, it's a really, really tricky tie, isn't it? You know, do we know a lot about, the Greek champions? Well, not a lot, but they have certainly lost a lot of goals from last season. They lost their top striker to Las Palmas, but they've still got a great striker, Croatian striker, Levaya, who's going to be a big threat tonight. So as long as Celtic can keep that back door shut, then you're more than confident that they can score goals at the other end.
Yeah, Celtic looking to get to the group stages for the 3rd successive season under Brendan Rodgers. You sense there's an expectation around here these days?
There certainly is, and everyone's talking already about, the next ties, the playoff ties if they were to get through this. Let's just get through this first. I think this is a really, really tricky one, and they've certainly come with a statement of intent. They're going to play 4-4-2 tonight. Their manager said, last night in the conference that he wanted to win this game, so all makes up for an entertaining time.
Yeah, realistically, what do you think Celtic would be happy with tonight?
well, I think they want to take a lead and certainly not concede any goals. You know, I think, you know, if they were to take a 1-0 into the next one, then they certainly would be happy. But just a win.
Scott, thank you very much indeed. Now, the club are urging fans to get here as early as possible because of road restrictions in the city. And you know the drill by now. If you don't have a ticket, the game is live on BBC Radio Scotland. Kick-off 7:45. Jack.
Thank you very much, Chris. And more Celtic news now. The club looks like missing out on one of its main transfer targets this summer. John McGinn is on the verge of moving from Hibs to Aston Villa. The clubs have agreed a fee for the midfielder, who's been in Birmingham for talks and a medical over the last 48 hours. Celtic had 3 offers from McGinn rejected by Hibs, and an attempt to revive their interest seems to be too late.
Celtic will match the offer. So, but I think Villa are in the driving position at the minute. I don't know if John's head's been turned by Villa, or I have not spoken to him on it yet. But as far as I'm aware, they are certainly in a really strong position in terms of getting the services.
There's been another medal-winning performance by a Scot at the European Championships. The Commonwealth Games champion Grace Reid took silver in mixed synchro with her diving partner Ross Haslam. Rhona McLeod rounds up today's events.
The warmest of welcomes for local girl Grace Reid and her partner Ross Haslam, tipped as favourites for the 3-metre springboard event. They started strongly and topped the rankings in the early rounds with some impeccable diving, but the German pair ultimately proved more consistent and claimed the gold.
We knew they were going to give us some tough competition. They were very worthy winners today. They stepped up, but yeah, it was nice having them sort of push us along the way, and it made us elevate our game. Having the crowd behind me, hearing the Scottish accents for sure, it's been such a sort of warm atmosphere, and I really fed off that.
So a European silver medal for Grace Reid here in her home city of Edinburgh, but all around the country and in Berlin. It's been another busy day of European action. The time trial events took in some of Glasgow's most iconic sites as the cream of Europe took to the roads, venturing as far as the Stirlingshire countryside, the championships reaching new fans around the country. Meanwhile, in Berlin, Scotland's Chris O'Hare and Jake Whiteman enjoyed a comfortable qualification to the 1500 metres final. Both won their heats, with Whiteman qualifying fastest for Friday night's final.
Everything you probably predict about how the race will go won't happen, so I'm going to go in there for the win, probably like everybody else in the field, so try and play to my strengths.
And in the last few minutes, Ailey Doyle has qualified for the final of the 400 metres hurdles. The former European champion won her semi. The final takes place on Friday. Rhona McLeod, reporting Scotland at the European Championships.
Now, if this year's summer holidays included the kids asking, "Are we there yet?" well, this is the story for you, and indeed for them. The granddaughter of a New Zealand farmer is writing a book about how he drove his family not once but twice from their home down under back to his ancestral heartland on Skye. Jackie O'Brien can tell us more.
Long-haul flights to and from New Zealand hadn't even taken off before Alan McLeod decided to take his wife and 6 children on an ancestral pilgrimage over the world to Skye in a homemade camper van.
So he used the chassis of a World War II Scout car, he used the cab of a city bus and a tractor engine. And my grandmother canned around 400 tins of home-killed pork. The children, they plucked chickens and raised livestock to sell so that they could get enough money for passages on a ship to Singapore.
But the route from Singapore was fraught with danger as the skybound McLeods trucked over rough terrain through underdeveloped countries, including Malaya, Iran and India, where many members of the family were left hurt in a serious crash.
All the children were injured, but my mother was very badly lacerated across her face and her arms. They were in the middle of nowhere, but fortunately an American missionary managed to get to them and spent 6 hours suturing my mother's face with a needle and thread and no anaesthetic.
Against the odds, retracing the steps of their ancestors who had emigrated to New Zealand, they made it from Dunedin to Dunvegan, where they fulfilled a wish to meet their clan chief, Dame Flora McLeod.
They hadn't bathed for 10 days when they arrived, and she invited them to take a bath in the castle. They dined with her there and she took them out on the loch. They were very pleased in the end.
But one adventure-filled trip to Skye was not enough. Alan returned several years later when, after acquiring a rusty old fishing boat, he finally emulated his grandparents' original sea journey by sailing back to New Zealand with his kids as his crew. Jackie O'Brien reporting Scotland, Inverness.
And how happy do they all look? Not very. Let's get the weather now from Christopher.
Jackie, thank you. Hello there, good evening to you all. Today it's been a case of sunshine, showers and rainbows. In fact, let's take a look at the satellite and radar pitch. You can see a rash of showers across the country through the course of today, but out with them there was some sunshine, some blue sky. In fact, the best of the weather was in Shetland with plenty of dry and fine conditions. Over the next few days, we've got areas of low pressure circling around like sharks. In between, ridge of high pressure. Not really dry, there's going to be some showers, but this low is coming our way at the weekend, bringing some fairly persistent rain, but the timing is still open to doubt. Anyway, let's take a look at the next few hours. Today's showers fizzle and fade away. It's largely dry overnight, some clear spells, quite a cool night. And there'll be a further rash of showers towards the west coast and the Hebrides. Temperatures there around 8 to 10 Celsius. In towns and cities, the countryside will be cooler. So to start tomorrow, it's dry for many, bright for many, but showers once again through the Highlands and Islands. And whilst most of them will be staying there through the course of the day, expect one or two to come further east. And by afternoon, you could catch one almost anywhere. But as a general rule of thumb, the further east and southeast that you are tomorrow, the drier you'll be. Temperatures 15 to 18 Celsius and a brisk southwesterly. Some of these showers could be heavy, particularly across the Highlands and Islands. The odd rumble of thunder in the mix at times too. But as I say, out with them, some sunshine. Although for Shetland, after today's dry weather, you'll get some showers tomorrow too. Rest of the afternoon into the evening, the showers fade, some late sunshine. And then Friday, and the showery theme is with us once again. I think probably the heaviest ones through the central belt and the south. Again, the odd rumble of thunder and temperatures around about the mid-teens. And so to the weekend, that area of low pressure working its way in, and the weather models still not in agreement. This is a bit of a halfway house between them. Rain arriving from the west, probably around about the middle part of the day and moving east, but it could still change. So if you've got outdoor plans, stay tuned to the forecast. That is the forecast for now.
Thank you very much, Christopher. And now a reminder of tonight's main news. There you are. The row over plans to evict failed asylum seekers in Glasgow. The UK's immigration minister refuses to say whether she supports the move. And that's Reporting Scotland. I will, of course, be back with an update on all the main stories in our late bulletin at 10:30. Until then, from all the team, goodbye.